Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Turning Points. David and Versan, how are you doing today?
Excellent.
Very good.
Doing
Very
great.
good.
Very good. Yes, well, we don't have a lot of time to waste with introductions. I guess Japan is on the move again, moving from very low rates to higher rates for the first time in decades. That can indeed trigger economical chaos, not only in America, but I guess in the entire world. That's a serious issue that presents on the table right now. So we better get started. David, you have mentioned to me that you want to share a few articles. So why don't you go ahead and bring that to the screen?
Yeah, let me just go over here and share my screen. And what I want over here, actually, okay. So I'm going to share a few first things. I want to share some stuff domestically first, and then get into some of the Japan stuff. But right now, we know the Federal Reserve is looking at another rate reduction here in America. And of course, this is going to cause, a lot of risk, money moves. And, a lot of investors and economists are saying here in this article will closely watch this particular meeting, because what they're looking at doing is they're doing another rate reduction. Now, if they do a 25 basis point rate cut, we're looking at cutting it from 3.5%, 3.75, all right, around that. And market participants are saying 87% chance that could happen. Well, normally when we see rate cuts like that, what normally happens is, money moves. Now, for crypto, in this particular article is talking about crypto markets are particularly sensitive to these Fed decisions. And we know that lower rates and higher liquidity usually encourages risk taking, pushing money, of course, into Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP and all that. Now, a lot of people are saying, hey, this rate cut, that the Fed is going to come out with could boost crypto and could push Bitcoin back over 100K and that kind of thing. Well, the other side of this coin, of course, is Japan. Now, we've heard a lot about the carry trade. Now, the first time I think I ever heard of, the Japan, this whole reverse carry trade of going back there. I believe, Versan, I know you had talked about it a while back, and this is going years back. It's been around for a lot now. I know Jake Claver has really talked about a lot, but what I want to show folks is that, right now, the 10-year Japan, the yield, the bonds are reaching an 18-year high. But the thing with respect to all this is that, this rate, it could threaten this cryptocurrency market. Why would that happen? Well, number one, this has not happened for about 30 years, as you mentioned there, Edo. The Bank of Japan's expected to raise its benchmark rate to that 0.75 at the December policy meeting, the highest level since 1995. Now, what a lot of people really, because it's, a lot of folks don't really consider how, this whole carry trade has benefited the West. Obviously, major businesses have been able to go over to Japan, borrow at practically zero interest rate, take those same amount of funds, convert them into dollars, and invest them in the broader marketplace. And so we have really experienced a pretty big economic boom over the last 30 years in a way in the West as a result of this kind of arrangement that's been going on. Well, with the rising of those rates, those dollars are now going back into Japan. So that is where the reverse is hitting. The impacts of that cannot be minimized. I mean, right now, from an economic standpoint, it comes at probably the worst possible time because our domestic economy is really hurting. And I think this is something to really emphasize, this important distinction. There is definitely a break, and I'm just going to stop sharing this right there, but let me just get over here. There is definitely a different break, in the economy and the market. I've talked about this at length, but right now the economy, you're watching a lot. I think they reported it's a 17-month low for consumer spending. Here we are, we're going into the holidays, and you got big organizations like Macy's, Walmart, a lot of these retailers that are not hiring that seasonal staff. And they're not doing it because the average Joes are not out there really spending.
Mm-hmm.
Watching a big economic impact in that, you've got credit card debt soaring, foreclosures soaring, repossessions on vehicles soaring, major institutions laying off tens of thousands of people. We're talking Meta, Microsoft, major tech companies, which are actually been carrying the market. These major tech companies, yet they're the ones cutting all the staff. If we see that, carry trade, they raise that rate and it's not baked into the system, that could cause a cascading effect where, it's really going to massively hurt, so we could see a pump up and a dump down with respect to these markets. One of the biggest indicators that I think you're watching, if you want to see the weakness of the dollar, is gold. I think gold is significantly appreciating as a real world asset. Of course, you want to see where the strength of the dollar is. Look at the price of gold, because as the dollar goes down, obviously the price of gold goes up. This game that they're playing right now is going to have massive impacts. And I think you cannot minimize the effect it's going to have on average people. People do not have the expendable cash to get out there and insulate themselves. It's almost like if you're starting to do it now, it's almost too little too late. Because you just don't have it. You're losing your job. You're replacing it with 3 other jobs. You're doing all of these things to try and, just protect your ability to survive. Those of us that have been in this space a long time, or we're buying gold way back there, or invested into these digital assets and these markets really early on, that is a massive blessing. And we just really need to be conscientious of that, because the market, yes, the market can really move at a time when the economy literally collapses. Give you an example, a real life example of that. And it's very obvious for all of us. When all this was going down, and everything shut down, the whole wide world economy came to a screeching halt. Yet we entered into probably one of the biggest secular bull markets the world had ever seen. How's that possible with no manufacturing, no shipping, no service businesses, no everything, people on their balconies banging their pots and pans? Well, it's because central banks injected the money into the market, and that's how they solve liquidity crisis. And that's exactly what they're doing. When they do that, lower those rates and increase that cash availability, remember what's going to happen. You're going to watch real world assets like gold, like silver, like these digital assets appreciate. But at the very same time, you're talking about a perfect storm with the Japan, interest rates themselves climbing. Big, big, big. Anyway, that's my commentary on it. I hope you guys like that, what I shared there.
Yeah, of course. Totally.
Excellent. Excellent, David. Versan, why don't you go ahead and share your thoughts?
I mean, the entire discussion we're having here rests on a simple truth that the economic data that's being presented to us and the public is, it's not the economic reality that most people are living through. To your point, David, all the numbers are distorted, the reports are distorted, the signals are manipulated. I mean, I can go on, and the disconnect between the official data and the actual market conditions, it's never been crazier, in my opinion. That's exactly why they did the government shutdown. I mean, the real reason is that they needed time to cook the books and to rewrite the narrative before the next series of policy decisions came into play. We're going into another FOMC meeting, and we already know what's coming. Rates are going to go lower, exactly as you stated. The markets know it, and that's why you see a lot of violent volatility in the markets. Gold knows it. That's one reason why gold actually surged, because it's front running what the central banks are already planning to do. Simply refinance government debt on a massive scale. And, if central banks are just going to keep expanding government debt, then the gold price is only going to go higher from here. And when debt does get rolled over at lower rates, gold climbs even higher. So it's kind of baked into the cake. And the same goes with silver. It complements gold. So I think we're going to see commodities across the board at new all-time highs. I think inflation is going to be painfully high, and it's going to get even higher. And we already see consumers borrowing heavily going into the holidays. I was at the bank the other day and I heard this lady saying, it's the holiday season, and she was taking a loan out from the bank to go Christmas shopping. While that's going on, people are defaulting on their mortgages.
Yeah.
They're defaulting on their rents. I had some clients who are experiencing a lot of their tenants defaulting on their rents. Delinquencies are hitting new highs. Wages are stagnant, so they're not actually going up with how hard you're working, for less and less. And I think beneath the surface of everything we talked about, the economy is still completely collapsing, but it's happening very slow, like what Andy Schectman would say, death by 1,000 cuts. And the official narrative, you could say, is trying to convince the people that everything else is fine. And of course, I can go on and on, but this does tie us into the carry trade, which we can talk about here in a moment. But before we do, I'd like to get Edo's thoughts on this.
Yeah, well, Versan, I watched your show with Andy Schectman. Excellent, by the way. And what we are watching right now, it's even difficult to put everything into words because it's definitely a multidimensional chess game. It's so many angles that we can see. And why this matters for the United States, and of course, I want to tie that to the crypto market so people fully understand what's going on. So Japan holds $1 trillion worth of US treasuries. So can you guys imagine what happens if they have to sell even a fraction of that? Well, other nations will likely follow, and that triggers what we call the liquidity crisis. And by the way, this was well described by Jim Rickards. He mentioned that in 2011. That's the first mention I heard of this carry trade disruption in his book called Currency Wars, 2011. He did an excellent explanation. And I think David outperformed him. In the beginning of the life, he did a very exceptional explanation about this. But I want to get to the point, what this means for XRP. Well, first, we have to understand what this means for Tether, because Tether is heavily backed by US treasuries, right? So if the treasury market goes down, Tether is the first one to be liquidated. And so this is definitely getting interesting because Tether can lose its peg. Now, why that doesn't affect XRP, you might be wondering, because XRP is not backed by treasuries, is not tied to any country's debts. XRP stands as a neutral bridge currency. And ladies and gentlemen, when there is a liquidity crisis, the higher demand for a neutral bridge assets comes to an all-time high. And that's exactly why banks are struggling with liquidity. So XRP functioning as a global bridge currency is the final answer. And that's why everything is connected. Now, Versan, do you want to make some thoughts on that? I have some charts that I want to share here. And it's about the US debt that keeps increasing.
I mean, it's kind of baked into the cake. Debt will continue to expand until eventually it doesn't. People say the system is too big to fail. That's exactly where they're wrong.
Yeah.
We are seeing a transition, all right? And it's happening very quietly, systemically. No one's really paying attention because, again, they're creating the illusion that everything is okay. But how are they doing this? By injecting more liquidity into the system, which only creates more inflation and accelerates the collapse of the dollar. Despite how you want to sugarcoat it, I mean, I've explained the whole stablecoin narrative, and the stablecoin narrative is essentially a lifeline until it isn't as well. Gold is going to become the collateralized reserve currency or asset, you could say. And in a digital ecosystem, you're going to need some infrastructure that, can kind of bridge it with all other systems around the world and these blockchain-based settlement systems. But what's happening with Japan is very interesting because what essentially happens is that money is going to have to go back to Japan, and that's what they call the reverse carry trade. What is that going to do?
Yeah,
that's going to put more right. That's going to put more pressure on the debt markets. That means it's going to intensify. Okay, well, if the legacy financial settlement systems are going to be facing congestion and more fragility, you could say, in the system, and that's kind of where the XRP kind of fits into this, because if XRP is designed to operate, like you said, as a neutral programmable bridge asset that's capable of settling the cross-border transactions instantly, cheaply, effectively, efficiently, et cetera, but without counterparty risk. And that's unlike traditional rails. So XRP is not going to be dependent on those traditional legacy systems. And in a situation where you can move liquidity frictionlessly and permissionlessly, if that's even a word, from legacy institutions, that means it's going to be uniquely positioned to handle the flows during periods of stress. And we're
Right.
talking about liquidity crisis. And for the listeners and the naysayers out there, I promise you, it's not speculative. It's these are public statements from Japanese banks and other global
Yeah.
financial institutions that have simply confirmed this along the way, along this journey as well. And they're already exploring all these blockchain-based settlement systems to improve liquidity and reduce systemic risk. When you start to cross-reference the research, you start to cross-reference the developments with the macroeconomic trends in the data, it becomes very evident, actually, that there's going to be a time and place for XRP being positioned as a core solution to the structural weaknesses that they created. And this is kind of tying us into the larger narrative about how we're evolving, you could say, the evolution of the monetary system and central bank digital currencies, universal basic income, et cetera, et cetera. So we can talk about that in a bit.
Well, I want to share something quickly. I'm gonna bring.
I had something I was gonna pop up. I wanted to can I just share something really quick on Versan's point?
Yeah, go ahead, and then I can bring this one back.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just share this, because I think that this is something a lot of people, because I saw in the comments here, they're saying, okay, why XRP to be the solution for this liquidity problem with Japan? Well, the thing is, XRP is so entrenched into Japan's banking system presently. And the fact that it can be instantaneous, type of settlement. In liquidity crisis, you want instantaneous settlement, but you also want secure settlement. And Japanese banks, particularly through SBI, are heavily integrating Ripple's technology. This is literally just a Google AI. You can do this yourself to find this information out. And it says, with some reports claiming near total adoption of XRP by 2025. Now, SBI, a major driver, their joint venture, SBI Ripple Asia, actively uses XRP's on-demand liquidity for remittances from Japan to Southeast Asia. And this is a massive, they're talking billions of dollars a day. Well, the adoption rate projections suggest up to 80% of Japanese banks might integrate Ripple Tech by 2025. Well, it's already happening, and it's happening very, very quickly. And this is where I see XRP as being the solution in a massive way with this reverse carry trade. Because XRP can get out there with the on-demand liquidity. I mean, I know we've heard about this, but I think people get so desensitized to ODL because why? It's XRP's killer app. Cross-border remittances, bridge asset is the killer app. Agnostic, can be used anywhere on earth, 3 to 5 seconds for settlement. The fact is you're dealing with a jurisdiction, if you will, in the world where the adoption rate for XRP in the banking system, not retail, not just institutional, in the banking system is well over 50, 60%, headed towards that 80%. This can solve the problem that we will face. Now, if we see this happen, I do believe initially all markets are going to feel the impact. Boof, initially. Who's going to rise out of that? You think some meme coins are going to rise out of that? A lot of them are going to be burnt right to the ground. But I believe that we will see a change in our new monetary system. Now, one thing I want to share just with that is this, and then I'm going to end what I'm saying here. But one thing I think a lot of people do not even realize, and this is wild, okay? Our Treasury Department, right now, is actually go out there and requesting comment, from the the community, from the broader digital asset space. And this came out in August of 2025. And at that point, the U.S. Department of Treasury issued a request for comment required by the Genius Act, which furthers the administration's policy of supporting responsible growth and use of digital assets. Well, what were they looking for? Well, if you take a look down here, it says This request for comment offers the opportunity for interested individuals and organizations, which is primarily where they issued it to provide feedback on innovative or novel methods, right? Techniques, strategies that regulated financial institution use. What's a regulated financial institution? Banks, or could potentially use to detect illicit activity involving digital assets. In particular, Treasury asked commenters about application program, get this, interfaces, artificial intelligence, digital identity verification, and use of blockchain technology and monitoring. Guys, this is coming. And I've heard all the arguments and everything that there is, been in the space way too long. We are watching the dominoes fall right before our very eyes. And I kid you not, they are going to show up, the same people that lit the fire with the hose. And I've said that before, they are. And they are going to have all this in place. They are out there. Why would the Treasury Department seek commentary on digital IDs if they have no intention whatsoever to ever introduce them? They will. And what's that lead us to? Universal basic income.
There you go.
Majority of people hurting, and that's where it's going. At least that's what I believe. Now, sorry about that. I wanted to throw that out there.
No, you did great. Can I please add some flavor to what he said? Also, a lot of people will say through the whole SBI connection, oh, China's not going to be using XRP. In fact, we have sufficient proof, evidence, you could say, through documents and cross-referencing the research again, that China actually has indirect exposure to XRP through the BRICS New Development Bank. Okay. And SBI is in there. And there are, of course, they have all these corridors that link through Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. So they do have exposure to XRP, right? And we have a document also from the Russian central bank from 2018 talking about building a blockchain-based settlement system upon the XRP ledger. So that's already also baked into the cake as well, right? So here's where the bigger picture comes together. To your point, this is going to be the mechanism through which XRP gradually consolidates the global financial system. Again, I put a tweet out the other day how XRP, in fact, is the only digital asset so far that is designed to sit above the system, not inside of it. And that's why it's neutral. That's why it is permissionless. And if liquidity is going to need to move freely across borders in real time, value is not going to ask for approval. It's going to flow through whatever network gets the job done, right? And if you look around the world, more and more institutions all over are integrating everything they're doing into the XRP ledger infrastructure, even with the whole ETF narrative, which I don't really support what ETFs do, but I can see the value that they could provide for some people, I guess. Okay. Whole different discussion. But that ties us also into the fact that we may see a gradual, well, not gradual, I would say, but it could create a supply shock. And that's one of the mechanisms that I see playing out in real time. And that's why I don't pay attention as much as I used to the XRP charts years ago. I know there's a time and place for all of this. You have to watch the adoption. You have to watch and understand the infrastructure and the macro forces behind all of it. So not the noise. And
right.
everything starts with money, which is funny because every major shift in society traces back to the monetary system, because the monetary system is what underpins the architecture behind who we are, right?
Yep.
So everything that's being built on top of it is going to change it. And it really is, XRP is the secret sauce to the global payment puzzle.
And what you're saying is perfect. And you were on the committee, Verson, with Jimmy Valley. I know Jake was in there. You were on that committee that was doing evaluation. That's the first time I remember Jimmy Valley talking with us about it. That was the first time that I ever heard of the Japanese carry trade. Now, I know that, Jake Klaver's talked about it a lot more, but Jimmy and that whole group that you were a part of, that's where a lot of it started to enter into this space in a big way. Now, a lot of us probably didn't see it or believe that it was going to unfold the way in which it has. Now, let's hope. I mean, we all want to see this space really fly, but it's going to be in a situation where a lot of the world is going to be in a very big crisis.
I agree.
And, it's like, you don't want to be wishing for it, really. In a way, you don't. It's going to be sad because very, very, very few people are genuinely invested in this space in a way that could protect them from what's coming. That's
well, to your point, well, for a few things, I might as well just share it. When we were working with Jimmy Valley in the early days, we learned so much from Jimmy. He kind of set us on a path where we, of course, had to do our own research. The one missing piece that I didn't have at that time through the research was gold. And I'm at a point now where I understand the markets very deeply. And I know for a fact that gold is going to play a role in all of this.
Right.
I do believe at one point in my career here, I would say XRP would be gold backed. And I think I was wrong about that because I think XRP will be the bridge behind gold. You see what I mean? As the settlement layer for gold, as the neutral reserve asset for the digital age for gold, being the collateral again. So I was wrong, but I was correct in some aspect. And like every major turning point in history, to your point, David, there's going to be a new class of winners. And sadly, a much larger class is going to get left behind because they ignored a lot of the uncomfortable truths until it was too late. And that's kind of where we are today. What I see very interesting moving forward as far as this conversation is more liquidity injections, more government debt being refinanced. And if you look at what Trump is doing as well, his narrative is talking about replacing the chairman now. And I know for a fact that the next Fed chair is going to be very pro crypto. Now, if you combine that with all the existing structural pressures that we're talking about in the system, I think we're actually going to head into a market environment where digital assets will become necessary. But that's when I think you might see some short-lived bull market. I believe that. But at the end of the day, the discussion is really going to be about utility. And we're getting to a point where there's a loss of interest in crypto, is not like there used to be, but meme coins, speculative assets, I think they're going away. I really believe that. And of course, the Clarity Act will put all of this into perspective for everybody else.
Agree.
One of the reasons, Versan, that is less interest in crypto is because people don't have money to invest. People are just surviving. And this is a universal struggle right now. We can quickly go back to the Japanese carry on. Just a second. I want to share here on the screen. So we have global tensions on the rise. And why I shared this article? Well, this is from 3 days ago. And we see that Iran is definitely putting more pressure on the Strait of Hormuz. This is something we didn't speak about. This article, as I said, is from 3 days ago. And I want to remind you, Japan does not produce any oil. So they have to import 100% of its oil consumption. So if Hormuz gets disrupted, this can have massive consequences. And of course, that can force Japan to raise interest rates. And that can indeed be the beginning for the carry trade to collapse. So it's, as I said before, it's a multidimensional chess game. We have global tensions on the rise. And I think there's something we can all agree. I think the three of us, perhaps most of our audience can agree, that for XRP to rise, that's not going to happen because of technical analysis, not going to happen because XRP will be following BTC movements, but it will happen because of a change on the entire financial system. And this might be the trigger. So this is something we have to be watching very closely. Now, coming back to the BTC question, the chart's not looking good for BTC, but it goes beyond the chart. We have spoken last week about the liquidation price for MicroStrategy. That's about $73,000. So if BTC drops just another 10%, things can get very ugly for Bitcoin. And as you said, Versan, and also David, it's about utility, it's not about speculation anymore. I don't see any. I wish to come here because sometimes people think that because I hold XRP, I want BTC to fail. That's not true, because I know a lot of people are going to get hurt. They're going to be holding BTC. I know a lot of people that refuse to see the facts, and they're going to go down with the ship. And it's going to be very painful. So it's going to be a handful of winners, and 100% the winners are going to be the ones that have some sort of global utility. It's going to be the XRPs, the XLMs, the SHXs. but it's definitely not going to be Bitcoin and Ethereum or anything that's tied to Tether, USDT. So there is this systemic threat to crypto in general. Of course, there are exceptions, and we are heavily invested on these exceptions. Now, I did a video this week about CBDCs, digital IDs. That's something I have been speaking very often on my channel, because in Europe, this is escalating very quickly. We have digital ID rolling out. We have CBDCs being discussed on every single European parliament is heavily pushing this global agenda. And I found it very funny or interesting, and I want to hear your take on that, Versan and David. I was reading comments, and most of the negative comments were coming from Americans, because they were saying that there is no way there will be CBDCs in the United States. Digital IDs are not happening here. And I'm curious about that. Is that correct? Because for what I see, the situation in Europe, it's not even we have a chance or no, it's happening. They are rolling out these things. So I'm very curious for the situation in America.
Well, as I mentioned earlier there, and I'll just share that screen again, we know for an absolute fact the Treasury Department is requesting commentary from market participants, primarily institutions and, the CEOs of these organizations. And in particular, the Treasury was asking about application, of program interfaces for AI and digital identity verification. I mean, the fact of the matter is digital IDs are coming. We've even seen it when it comes to domestic travel. In fact, in 2026, if you don't have certain documentation, you might be refused to even fly from Texas to California. And that is a fact. And so, I think I'm not sure how they'll roll it all out, but they are definitely going to roll it all out. I do believe there will be some event that will orchestrate, the pushing of the digital IDs. I think that's just going to be a fact. It's either going to be I think that it could be some sort of a banking crisis that causes it, where or a data breach, a significant data breach that is so significant that they're going to say, "Hey, you have to have this info." And remember this: it's not only going to be for your finances. Your digital identity is going to be connected with your passport, your taxes, your educational history, your medical records. I mean, you name it. Even perhaps your social media accounts are going to want your digital ID so that they can verify it's you. And it will be utilizing distributed ledger technology to do it, because of course they're going to say that they need a system that is so robust that even AI can't crack it. And so, this is what I believe we're going to see. And I think we're probably going to see this within 12 to 18 months. I would be shocked if it doesn't happen that fast.
I mean, I want to, oh my God, so much to unpack over here.
Yeah, for sure.
Again, combining all the existing structural pressures we see in the system today, and of course, where we're heading, which is digitization, that does tie us directly into the global push that you see happening for central bank digital currencies, digital identification systems that are happening throughout Europe. It's being tested there. It's already happening in China. America is going to probably get hit the hardest. And it's funny, last year I was telling Edo on the Turning Point here that watch and see. I said, we're going to have an immigration crisis that was created by, of course, the Biden administration. And I think it's controlled opposition on both sides. And once Trump got in office, he's going to push for digital IDs because of the immigration problems that we're having, which was, of course, orchestrated by the very same people who are trying to clean up and write the rules for and enforcing the regulations for it. What's interesting is that the next crisis, Black Swan event, could be a multitude of things because you have all these cards ready to be played. But it could be a banking crisis. It could be a banking crisis, essentially a liquidity crisis, where all financial grids are hit. And the other thing is a false flag event that could happen here in the United States, like an attack, which we've seen before with 9/11, which was done by our CIA and et cetera, things I can't talk about here. But you have to be mindful that the illusion that everything is under control, or people say trust the plan, that's exactly how these systems continue to advance without resistance. You have to remember that, because the so-called disclosure movement that people talk about, a lot of this disclosure took place more than 10 years ago. It's just many people didn't pay attention to it. So a lot of the disclosure is being resurfaced again, but being co-opted by controlled opposition. And while all of this is going on, especially here in the United States, I'm sorry to say this, but you have the most pacified people on the planet. And this is actually acknowledged worldwide. The rest of the world calls the United States the dumbest country in the world. And they say that for a reason without being disrespectful. But it's because people are being led to believe something big is happening behind closed doors, and that the groundwork for what's being laid out is here to save them. And that's not true. The groundwork that's being laid out is for a fully digital financial grid. And we could actually see proof of this. The architecture is being built by or enforced by the Bank for International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, and of course the European Union, which is heavily influenced by who? Palantir, Oracle, and the very same technocratic class who's connected to the Pentagon and the CIA, who gets their financing from Congress. So it's so obvious for those who really understand. And sadly, the infrastructure is being built right now, whether people want to acknowledge it or not. And that's why you need physical gold. You need real assets, because we don't understand how this thing is really going to play out. We have a good idea because of the research we've done. And anyone calling me a clown in here, you have no idea what you're missing out on, and you have no idea what you're talking about. I've been dealing with a lot of this fear, uncertainty, and doubt from people in the ecosystem simply because they haven't done the research. All right. And final thing I'll say is having to face an uncomfortable truth is quite uncomfortable, but that's how you can actually face your fears and kind of find solutions to what you can do to protect yourself. And of course, your anonymity. But that's why I'm always back on gold and real physical metals, because I think that's the only anonymity you're going to have.
I think you're right. I think in that capacity, if you were able to actually acquire it without, when the price was low, remember with FinCEN, you do a transaction over $3,000. Well, that's reported, isn't it? Well, now an ounce of gold's over $4,000. So if you walk in and you purchase an ounce of gold, it's more than $4,000. The bullion dealer is obligated to report that to the government. So and this is an issue because, of course, we have in the past dealt with confiscation. 1933, U.S. government, by executive order, mind you, actually made it illegal for U.S. citizens to hold gold bullion. Well, that made it pretty difficult. Now, I know a lot of people back then, they were not turning in their gold. They just kept it. They thought, forget this, and they just stuck it away somewhere. That was that. I think a lot of people now that are trying to insulate themselves for what's coming in that regard, it's almost like you've reached a point where it may even be too late, because we are so far down the road. Think about this. Just a few years ago, who in their right mind would have thought you'd see Larry Fink doing a world tour talking about the tokenization of everything? No, you wouldn't, because he was out there talking their book, saying, oh, nobody that we're dealing with is even interested in this distributed ledger technology space. And now he's the champion, sitting there at the WEF and all these different forums, talking about how the world is not prepared for how rapidly tokenization of every asset is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so they've laid down the rails. They've got the engines ready. The cars are all being connected. They are going to literally set them down the track. And yeah, these people out there, oh, well, we're idiots, we're clowns. Well, I'll tell you what, this idiot right here changed our lives in 13 months. Literally, bang, just like that. I know of other people that has literally revolutionized their lives financially. And I do personally believe, and this is my biased opinion, that this will represent the greatest wealth transfer in the history of mankind. Because you're talking about a monetary shift that has not happened since the invention of coin. That's how dramatic of a shift we're moving into. You're talking about your monetary instruments, and get this. Right now, most people are valuing these things, right? They're using the measurement criteria of the dollar. How much XRP, how many dollars, $100, $1,000, whatever. You're using a measurement criteria to value an asset that you literally believe is going to replace the very measurement criteria you're using. I think you need to think about what you're thinking about there, because this shift is going to be so tectonic. The way business, information, and value and everything is transacted is going to be revolutionary. They will even tokenize gold and silver. And you know, these powers that be, and when I say that, I'm talking International Monetary Fund, Bank of International Settlements that you pointed out, Versan, WEF, which is not even a jurisdictional body, but it's a bunch of billionaires that get around and talk about all this stuff. They themselves have coined it as the fourth industrial revolution. Well, I'll tell you what, any industrial revolution that we have ever experienced in the past, at the beginning, it's at the beginning, at the end of the old one and the beginning of the new one, that the biggest levels of volatility exist. And I think you really want to be thinking about, how are you positioning yourself? Because we're right there. We are right there. We are going to live through this and watch and see. And I personally believe that it's going to change people's lives. Certainly has changed our lives. I believe it will change other people's lives. So as far as I'm concerned, the people that aren't cluing in, they're the clowns. Because
I agree.
They're deceiving themselves.
Yeah, and if I can add some flavor also to what you said, you know David Roger Webb's The Great Taking. He wrote the book. He laid it out very clearly, and he exposed how governments were passing these silent laws to convert everything you own, which include your health, your data, your medical records, you name it, your assets, of course, your home, and retirement accounts, everything, right, into a tokenized asset. So the Great Taking, you could say as a synonym, is really the great consolidation. And where it gets very interesting is that, here's where I'm going with it. If everything is eventually going to be tokenized and thrown on the blockchain, it's going to need the cross-border functionality, interoperability, liquidity for cross-border settlements of tokenized assets. That's kind of where XRP also plays another role in there, where all value is essentially consolidated, settled, and global liquidity will flow from. And that's why we've said many times that, you know, XRP, it's not about holding it for profit at the moment. It's about positioning for where this is all going. So anyone who's, you know, upset with the price fluctuations, you have to remember that there's a time and place where it will potentially be decoupling because it sits above it. It's kind of mixed in with about 30,000 different cryptocurrencies. And in fact, that's the genius of what they did here. They've stalled regulation intentionally to create confusion where people are asking the question, well, what if it's this? What if it's that? How do you know? And that's where research is very critical. But we have enough documentation, and we've shared it all over this podcast. We've shared screenshots from some of the PDFs we have. We've shared it with our clients before. So the proof is there. It's just you have to be smart enough to either connect the dots or hold on to what you have conviction in. And the only way you're going to have conviction into XRP is simply by understanding those macro forces we talked about today.
Nicely said, Versan. There is one particular question that I want to address, and perhaps also want to hear your takes on these ones. So he asks, what do you guys recommend for just regular people who don't have a lot of money to acquire assets? After all of my bills, I am left only with $400 extra a month. What do I even do at this point? And I love this question because I know that's a common situation to a lot of people. And I think the fact that you are left with $400, it's already a privilege, because in most countries, I have been traveling a lot. You guys, if you follow me on my other channels, especially on Instagram, you see that I travel to every month to 3 different countries. In Europe is much easier. And most people are not left with $100 at the end of the month. But what I want to encourage you is that history never rewarded the largest bugs. So it's not the ones who bought 100,000 BTC in 2011 that actually won the race. Are the ones that actually held it for the longest period of time and that have protected the digital assets in cold wallets. So I would focus in your case, and of course, not a financial advice, I would DCA. If you have this $400 extra, I think you have to feel blessed that you still have some money left, because most people are not left with any money by the end of the month. They are in survival mode. People can't think about investing when their cortisol levels are so high that they are thinking, how am I going to pay the rent next month? Do you think they have money to put on XRP? So I think you are very lucky with $400 extra a month. And if you just buy little by little, and just think about this, if you did this when XRP was 50 cents, now you would be sitting probably on the top 10% holders, perhaps even in the top 5, given the price of XRP. So just continue to accumulate. Diversify in SHX, for example, and you can build a very strong portfolio. There is another topic I want to talk, and because as governments are moving towards censorship, control, digital ID, CBDCs, there is a question that a lot of people have in their minds, and people are thinking, how we going to get rid of that? In other words, how we going to bypass government control by holding our XRP? Are they going to find ways to control our XRP? And I want to bring that to light because I think it's very important. And first, we need to understand the technology. So the XRP ledger has what is called the clawback feature. And the clawback feature can be a dangerous feature because it allows whoever issues the token on the XRP ledger can claw back the feature. And they did that for obvious reasons. One, regulatory compliance. So if financial institutions are going to claw back an asset, for example, a stable coin, for regulatory compliance reasons, they need the clawback feature. So considering the XRP has a clawback feature, that is an indicator is going to be used by financial institutions. Second, you have for tokenization purposes. Let's say you tokenize a house, you tokenize real estate on the ledger, and let's say each person bought a token that represents ownership of this property. So let's say there is a fire on the building. You need a way to mimic this event on the blockchain. So if this property gets destroyed, you need to claw back these tokens, and that's why the clawback exists. Now, the important part is that clawback doesn't apply to XRP. So is the only asset in the ledger that nobody can claw it back by default. So if you have XRP on your cold wallets, it's almost as we can create a parallel economy that runs on XRP. That's how crazy it gets.
Very good point. Very important. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was having these insights because it's like whenever something goes too much in one direction, like authoritarian control, there is this thing that usually nature by default has a way to sorting things out. So in one hand, you have this authoritarian control, issued assets on the ledger that are subject to the clawback feature. In the other hand, you have XRP that sits as the foundation of the entire ledger and nobody can claw it back. So once you have it, it's yours, in simple terms.
Well, that's what neutral means. Yeah.
And agnostic. No, it's very, very good. I wanted to address that question that you answered before we talked about, XRP and how it can form its own, because it is a monetary instrument. One of the factors a lot of people don't really think too much about is risk. Now, risk is not just, your ability of what you can afford to lose, because, risk can be measured also by reward. If, for instance, you take real estate is a low risk investment. Usually, in most cases, it can be a lower risk investment. Whereas digital assets, right now, it's the volatility in this space that causes, these big swings that could drop the price significantly. But it's also that same volatility that can send these things instantly to dollars that blow people's minds and can revolutionize lives. That volatility, guys, is not going to exist forever, because what causes the volatility, of course, is the uncertainty. Well, when we get the Clarity Act and we get the implementation, and they literally have, and we can see the infrastructures being laid down, and when they present that to the wide world and they introduce it as a solution, that volatility is gone. Well, with the volatility comes down the risk. With the risk comes down the reward. You see what I'm saying? The percentage gains. And I always throw this out there because I think it's really important to consider. If anybody is selling XRP at $100, someone else has to be buying it. This is not like going to Monte Carlo over there, sitting at the table all night and taking your chips to the cashier at the end. For everyone who goes out there and is buying or selling XRP at $100, someone else is buying that. But do you think that the person buying it at $100, $1,000, when all the infrastructure is in place, is going to see the same level of reward? And the guy taking the greatest level of risk? No, but you need to be able to assess that for yourself and understanding when you're in a situation where you don't know how to make a decision and your decisiveness lacks. Well, one way you can address that is to expand what you know. And this is why I'm constantly encouraging people, get educated, understand what's going on in the world. Why? Ask why? Ask as many questions as you need to ask and go out and get those answers, because the answers, I personally do believe this. I've said it so many times. The answers we find for ourselves are the ones we trust the most. You're getting our opinions here, guys. Biased opinions. In fact, my opinion's biased, but the reason is because I put so much energy and effort into researching this whole deal that I'm 100%, 200% convinced.
Yeah.
But I think that's an important thing that people need to understand. The volatility is not going to last forever, and the potential for exponential gains won't be around either forever.
Well, volatility is your friend right now. In fact, it's your greatest ally. It gives you the opportunity to buy those dips, those fire sales we saw. And the funny thing is, crypto is so widely held, but it's poorly understood by most. And there's a lot of financial institutions that simply turn people's panic into their profit. And that's really how they play the game. Okay. What I've always encouraged is do your research. Very simple. All the data's out there at this point. And I remember when nobody was talking about this, like 6 years ago, 7 even. And the data's out there. Do your research, have conviction in what you're investing in, simply protect it. You have to have layered security when it comes to crypto or just any digital asset out there. So cold wallets, Faraday bags, keeping it offline. The only real concern I always had when the Clarity Act comes and eventually when the IMF acknowledges XRP's role as maybe an ESDR, electronic special drawing rights, or some form of currency, is really the on and off ramps. But that's the beauty of it, because I mean, blockchain and being a neutral reserve asset was supposed to create an environment where you and I can do business together and transact with each other within our own community. Why the hell are we using exchanges? Why the hell do we need banks? Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, you may not even have to sell your XRP because it in and of itself could be the monetary instrument.
That's my point. It is.
The point is, it can become a parallel economy. I truly believe it can become a parallel economy if you hold XRP.
Yeah, but that's why I don't like all these brokers and these financial institutions that are trying so hard to convince you need to keep your crypto here. You need to protect,
almost as if they know something. You know? It's fishy.
You need to protect your crypto from the institutions. You need to protect it from the hedge funds and the individuals out there who are simply trying to make a profit as a middleman. Okay, who makes money on you buying XRP? The exchanges. Have you seen Uphold's fees? Coinbase, their fees. I mean, it's insane. So who's really profiting on all this new asset class? It's the exchanges, it's the brokers, it's the middlemen. And that's why I've stuck to my guns. I've never changed my conviction on what I've been sharing with people, the strategy. It's very simple. And I think that's why, it's very important that people stick with us, because we've been giving you facts from the very beginning. And I will never tell you to do something that I'm not doing, right? It's very easy to protect your wealth in this digital ecosystem, in my opinion. And you just need to be patient. And in the meantime, you need to continue to adopt to the environment as far as the job market, pay attention, make yourself useful, adopt to some of the AI infrastructure. That way you could remain in the game and not get, phased out, because the job market is changing. And you need to collect gold and silver. I have to keep reiterating this. You need metals in your possession. I mean, this is sovereignty. This is them taking sovereignty away from you. If I'm not mistaken, Edo, I think I saw a new law that was being passed in Europe about telling people they need to declare their gold now when they're buying it. Oh my God. Like that's world headline news right there.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Europe is going ahead of the curve, and when it comes to control and taxation, it has become a hell basically here to hold any digital assets. Basically, I am setting my tax residency in Cyprus. If you have been following my last videos, I have said this multiple times. And there is so many things we can still talk, but we are almost out of time. Now, I want to make some final comments, and one of them is that we can all agree that fiat currencies have already collapsed. Let's be honest, if we go back 5 years or 6 years on time, the purchasing power is probably down, 200 or 300%? Can we all agree on that? I mean, you go to the groceries with 100 euros, you can barely make it for a week. I mean, for a week, I am being optimistic, okay? So it's basically empty money. It's not holding any value anymore. And what central banks have been doing in this past 5 years, it has been exactly to stack gold, because they were not predicting, they were orchestrating the collapse of the fiat currencies. And now, interesting, we have the same pattern, and I'm going to share something to the screen with Tether. So Tether is right now buying golds more than any central banks. Okay, so there is a rabbit hole that we should go down. I'm not going to do this on this live streaming, and I will be very honest, I was considering to go down this rabbit hole and put myself 5-6 hours of research, as I always do in the past, but that causes me a problem, because if I do that, I will want to make a video, and if I make a video about that, maybe I will lose my channel. So I will leave this for you. I give this homework for the audience. Go for your own rabbit hole on why Tether is buying more gold than many central banks. There is an underlying agenda. They are getting ready for something. They are spending useless dollars, the obsolete version of the US dollar, which is called USDT, backed by nothing. So there is an underlying risk for Tether. I don't know when that's going to implode. I can only say that the clock is ticking. And as a final thought, 1 month ago, I was in Egypt, and I was flying from Greece to Egypt, and I met this Egyptian guy in the plane that became my friend. And I was talking to him, and he was telling me that it was his first international travel, and in order to fly to Greece, he had to save months of his salary. And I was thinking, how is possible he had to save months? I mean, the flight was like 130 euros. And he told me, yes, but the salary that I take in Egypt after taxes, it's $130. It's not even a joke, $130. Yeah. So, and sometimes we live in a bubble in Europe, in the United States, but you have the majority of the population is living with similar realities. You have Egypt, you have African countries, you have similar reality in South America, where currencies have been 100% evaluated. In the best, let's analyze from this perspective. Someone that earns $130 a month In the best case scenario, if they save, let's say, half of their salary should be about 60 or 70 bucks, they can buy 30 XRP per month. So I want just to leave these thoughts, and we just hit 1 hour. Versan, any thoughts? And David's?
Yeah, real quick, I'll try my best to make it quick. Final thoughts really is about the strategy so far hasn't changed. You need to keep some dry powder aside. Try your best to load up whenever you see these dips. We saw some fire sales last week. That's a prime opportunity to ride this thing on the way back up. Some of the major structural forces haven't changed. Devaluation of fiat currency is going to escalate and continue. And final thing I'll say is I saw a very uninformed comment saying that Tether isn't going anywhere. Okay. You're right. I will support
Let's bring the white paper this time.
That's a red flag for somebody who doesn't understand anything, okay, in this ecosystem. Now, listen, first of all, Tether has accumulated billions of dollars through their fees. And what did they do with that? Instead of holding the pure dollar-based reserve assets that they claim they have, they converted it into gold. What does that tell you? That reveals the true assessment about what they believe. They don't even trust the damn asset that their own stability depends on. And they've encouraged naive people like you, whoever this individual was, to cling to the dollar-pegged IOUs. And Tether continues to position itself with sovereign wealth. I mean, real gold. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Stable coins are anything but stable. And I wrote a detailed article about this, and I'll tell you why. It's because they cannot escape the reality that they're tied to the dollar framework, okay? If the dollar is going to continue to lose purchasing power because we keep expanding our debt, okay? Because of this, that means the stable coin is going to inherit the structural decline of this same framework. Do you understand? So again, people don't realize that the underlying asset or collateral behind these stable coins are dollars, treasuries, and what are they? They're nothing but toxic, over-leveraged, and unstable. And that's where most people get it wrong. There's a time and place for it. But anyone that says it's too big to fail is foolish.
Or they never check the white. They never open the white paper on page 10. That's all I can say.
Yeah, very naive. Like I said, crypto is widely held, but very poorly understood by most. It's very sad.
Yeah. There we have the white paper. I will not read this again. I think we have showed this in the turning point at least 5 times. So just do your homework. Any final thoughts, David?
Well, I think that, the fact that you're showing this is vitally important. Look, all these markets begin and end with the debt market. And once you really understand that, then you can understand how the mechanics of the market work from there, because it all begins and ends with debt. And you see the unraveling of the debt market right now. It's what's going on, because we're talking about the bonds in Japan. Like, I think Japan is the United States. It holds, I think, the second highest amount of US debt and that type of thing. And so we're watching it just to come full circle. It's starting to implode. The cracks are forming. I think anybody that is ignoring that and believing that we're just going to continue on in the current system that we're in is deceiving themselves, because we are in a evolutionary environment for monetary instruments and how that's going to work. I do not believe another nation state is going to be out there and the next world reserve currency is going to be tied to any nation state. I think it's going to be agnostic. And this is where, I see XRP really fulfilling a massive role. You've even heard Christine Lagarde, when she was the head of the IMF, talk about the possibility there. She's now head of the ECB, European Central Bank. Christina Georgieva, who is now the current head of the IMF. They're all singing the same tune. Problem is, most people are not listening to it. And they are going to get hit in the face with such a shock that by 2030 you'll own nothing and you'll be just happy to have a little bit of food on the table perhaps. But what they've got planned for us is going to be significant. And Judy and I have traveled the world. I will say this to just add on to your Egyptian friend. I know places that we've been in the wide world where people subsist on maybe $90 US a month. So if you are sitting in a position where you hold any of these assets, you have to consider yourself extremely, extremely blessed, because the majority of the world, they couldn't even do it if they wanted to. And the reality is that in terms of global population that are even exposed to XRP, probably 0.001%. And yet you're going to watch these things, these digital assets, revolutionize the financial system. And it's doing it already. The infrastructure is there. I don't think we can be more clear. If anything, I would say this: protect yourself. You got a lot of scammers out there pretending to be me, pretending to be Bursan and Edo on all these platforms. And we will never, I personally will never DM you to ask you to participate in any kind of a plan. Oh, send me some of your assets. And I want to point out, if your assets have no value and all this is just a dog and pony show and all this is going right over the cliff, then I'll tell you what, these scammers would not be out there trying to steal it from you so badly. Because no thief is breaking in to steal what has no value. So be careful, be careful. And we love you guys, man. We're telling you everything that we believe and why we believe it. It's up to you to decide what you're going to do with that information. But I'll tell you what, I really do see this is going to change. And that's after 24, almost 25 years at a senior level position in the tax department there in Canada, and having watched things unfold and knowing what the legislation is saying. And things are coming, guys. They just are. You just have to do a little research and you'll find out for yourself. And that's my last bit.
Nicely said. Nicely said. I have a final thing I want to share. Is just be very careful with the YouTube comments. I don't know if that happens to your channels as well, Versan and David, but whenever I post a video, about 10 minutes later, it's flooded with bots that are promoting some random fake cryptocurrency garbage that's likely scam tokens. I don't know why they target my channel, and I promise you, every time I publish a video, I spend at least 30 minutes deleting every single one of those.
Guilty. I do the same.
I hate it's one of the worst things, because if you put 2 videos a day, that's 1 hour per day deleting comments. It's very frustrating. So one thing I ask you guys, if you see some comments, reports that can help. And second, when you see comments from real people, like the comments from real people, because then these comments will stand out and the chance someone gets scammed decreases. Of course, I'll put my best efforts to delete this garbage, but it's something it's not on my control. Sometimes they just pop up.
I have a better solution. Don't even comment. Do the research.
Yeah.
You
Even
have
better.
only so many hours in the day. Use them wisely.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. And we're going to see you next Monday.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.